The Loyalist Legions sacrifice life and limb to achieve a prosperous future for humanity, each bearing scars from the conflict which tore the Imperium asunder. While some incurred losses of worlds, companies, and champions, those whose Primarchs fell in battle suffered the most devastating sorrow. For today, we shall elucidate the merciless sons of the 10th Legion, whose quest to transcend the weakness of flesh imperils their own humanity. The Sons of the Gorgon, the Iron Hands.
Rest. We were not made to rest. We go on, unflinching, unstoppable, unending in our strength. The Emperor did not make us for such mortal concerns as hearth and home, vanity or contemplation. We are his engines of war, his hammers, beating out the fabric of existence into a vessel, fit for mankind to inhabit.
Many of the Primarchs of the Imperium are adored for their benevolence, but not all exhibit the traits of grace or kindness. Though the traitor Primarchs particularly are remembered for their bloodlust and cold demeanor, there is one true son of the Emperor whose commitment to the Imperium's ideals were ironclad. A Primarch whom, should he achieve his goals and duties without fault, would care not how the subjects of the Imperium would see him. A taskmaster and courageous leader, this Primarch led his legion as a harsh but fair commander. Primarch of the 10th Legion, Ferrus Manus. As the sons of the Emperor were scattered throughout the stars, Ferrus Manus's pod would land on the feral world of Medusa, impacting on the highest mountain, Karashi, the ice pinnacle. The capsule shattered the mountaintop, burying itself deep into the ice. Medusa's surface collapsing, reforming and shifting with the arrival of the Primarch. Growing in solitude, Ferrus would inspect the markings on his pod embossed with an X. Realizing it not to be native of the world, Manus would further examine runes and electroconductive stalagmites within the chamber in which he lived, his interference awakening a colossal biomechanical worm that lay dormant beneath the chamber, and after a futile effort to fight it, Ferrus would watch the creature escape and destroy everything within its path. The young boy would swear that one day it would die by his hands. The boy would then observe the world outside, seeing humans in the distance but remaining hidden from their gaze. As years passed, the clans of Medusa would discuss sightings of a strange boy, being dubbed names by the many sects and groupings of inhabitants such as the Cataclysm, the Hunter, the Finality, and the Son of Man. More years passed until the Primarch was fully grown. Unscathed from living isolated within the mountain's core, Manus would not join with the clans of Medusa, instead seeking challenges on the planet to test his might and resilience. Slaying many ferocious beasts would prove his raw strength, culminating with his battle against the Great Silver Worm, Asirnoth, the metallic beast which he had vowed to destroy. Impervious to conventional weapons, Ferrus would drown it in a river of magma, its flesh melting and fusing with the Primarch's arms, imbuing the Primarch with his legendary necrodermis-coated arms, with which his future legion would make their namesake. Returning to the clans and tribes, Manus would divulge his knowledge of technology, advancing their stunted civilization and allowing Medusa to prosper under the rule of his iron grip. Though the clans would fight amongst themselves, Ferrus would never intervene, seeing the competition wrought by their infighting to be healthy for their continued improvement. With the arrival of the Emperor, Manus would test his father through battle, leveling entire mountains as they fought. Manus would relish the test of his strength, and willingly bend the knee to a warrior worthy of matching his power. Assuming command of the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands would stand obediently at their father's side, for soon they would be needed to fight the Emperor's great crusade. Fulgrim would be one of the first Primarchs to meet Ferrus Manus. Initially, Manus would show disdain for his brother, seeing him as a foppish artist wasting time on culture whilst the reclamation of the galaxy was at stake. Fulgrim would jokingly refer to Ferrus as the Gorgon, a mythical Terran creature renowned for its ugliness and ability to turn men into stone. The moniker would resound throughout the Imperium as fitting for the Primarch of the Iron Hands, the Legion bringing untold thousands of planets into compliance due to their Primarch's remorseless and relentless drive to fulfill the will of his Emperor, purging every weak link in his chain of command or non-compliant world in pursuit of strengthening the Imperium. Fighting alongside the Emperor's children on many occasions, such as the compliance of the human disparate civilization, the two legions would forge tremendous bonds of trust and friendship, despite their unlikely contrast as warriors. Fulgrim had even boasted that he would create the perfect weapon to wield in the coming Great Crusade. As a master craftsman, the Gorgon would not let such a boast go unwarranted, and decided that they should compete to craft the finest weapons. Manus forged a sword known as Fireblade, its edge able to ignite alike to that of the Emperor's own weapon of choice, with Fulgrim forging the mighty Warhammer Forgebreaker, a weapon capable of leveling entire mountains. The two would see their brother's craftsmanship as superior and concede defeat, and in an act of respect and solidarity, exchange their weapons. Their bond as brothers now complete. However, during the Horus Heresy, their kinship would be tested and tragically torn asunder. Fulgrim would be lured by the temptations of chaos, and before the beginning stages of the heresy, would try to persuade Ferrus Manus to join his cause. Enraged at even the suggestion of such an act, Ferrus attacked Fulgrim, a short duel wherein Ferrus would break Fireblade, mirroring the breaking of the bond of their brotherhood. Due to a hesitation to kill his brother for his treachery, Fulgrim would take the opportunity to strike Ferrus unconscious and claim his own creation, Forgebreaker. The Gorgon's elite honor guard of the Morlocks would be ambushed and killed during the deception, injuring their captain Gabriel Santor, letting him watch the betrayal unfold. Gaining consciousness, Ferrus Manus would resolve to enact his revenge on his traitorous brother. Departing with all haste, the Gorgon would lead a charge of loyalist legions to destroy the traitor forces before their armies could engage the wider Imperium. With the aid of the Salamanders, Raven Guard, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, and Alpha Legion at his command, they would quash the traitor legions of the World Eaters, Death Guard, Sons of Horus, and Emperor's Children with overwhelming force of numbers. The battle would take place on Istvan V, with the loyalist initial waves of Vulcan, Corvus Corax, Ferrus Manus and their respective legions engaging the traitors. With victory assured, should their loyalist inbound legions be at their side, their trust in their brothers would be misplaced. As the second wave descended upon Istvan V, they would show their true colors. With the strength of 8 traitor legions, they would crush the loyalists. Istvan V was no longer a battle, it was a massacre. In an act of desperate defiance, Ferrus Manus would command his men to kill as many Emperor's children as they could. The Gorgon would face his brother Fulgrim again in battle, but this time only one Primarch would survive. Ferrus wielded Fireblade, reforged by his hand for one purpose: to end Fulgrim's life. Fulgrim would fight with the Layer Blade, a demon-infused sword which would aid Fulgrim's strike, cutting the head from the Gorgon's neck. With news of Ferrus Manus' death, Rabute Guilliman of the Ultramarines would grieve at the loss of his most favoured brother, with even Horus Lupercal claiming the Gorgon's skull and rambling to its facade, confiding that he lamented Ferrus' choice not to stand by his side during the Great War to end the Imperium. Though later in the heresy, in a final act of defiance, Manus would be reborn during the Battle of the Webway by the Emperor himself, fighting alongside the fallen heroes of the Imperium as a blazing spectre against the demonic hordes. The skull of Ferrus Manus would be returned to the Iron Hands. To this day, it rests upon the altar of the Eye of Medusa, guarded by the chapter's stalwart, Hellfather.
They are not my hands. This fact is forgotten by my brothers. Inexplicably, it has always seemed to me. The hands are strong, to be sure, and have created great things for us all, but they are not mine, and that counts for something. They forget that the silver on my arms comes from a beast that I vanquished. It is the mark of a great evil that I ended, and yet it persists within me. I would struggle to remove it now, I will not remove the silver from my flesh because I have learned to depend on it. The fault is with my mind. I rely on the augmentation given to me by my metal gauntlets, so much so that the flesh beneath them is now little more than a distant memory. A day will come when I will strip it from me, lest I lose the power to master myself forever. Already my legion's warriors replaced their shield hands with metal in my honor, and so they are too learning to doubt the natural strength of their bodies. They must be weaned of this practice before it becomes a mania for them. Hatred of what is natural, of what is human, is the first and greatest of the corruptions. So I record it here. When the time comes, I will strip my hands of their unnatural silver. I will instruct my legion to recant their distrust of the flesh. I will turn them away from the gifts of the machine and bid them to relearn the mysteries of the flesh, bone and blood. When my father's crusade is over, this shall be my sacred task. When the fighting is done, I shall cure my legion and myself. For if fighting is all there is, if we may never pause to reflect on what such devotion to strength is doing to us, then our compulsion will only grow.
Amadeus Duquesne served the Iron Hands Legion during the Unification Wars, Great Crusade, and Horus Heresy. As Lord Commander of the Stormwalkers during the Wars of Unification, Duquesne would command the 10th Legion prior to their reunion with their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, on the world of Medusa. Born within Old Albia, Amadeus, once installed within the Legion, would quickly ascend to its command. As one of the first Astartes of the 10th, Duquesne would lead his Stormwalkers during their conquest of the Afric and Pan-Pacific compliances of the regions. Masterminding the early victories of the Legion during the Great Crusade, including their iconic battle against the millions of Orc Xenos at the Battle of Rust, Duquesne would be among the most revered and respected commanders of the Iron Tenth. With the Legion's reunion with their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, Duquesne would be installed as a member of the Sorgal clan. Present during the Dropside Massacre of Istvan V, Duquesne would warn his most trusted battle brother and pupil, Shadrach Medusan, of the betrayal of the traitor legions and the death of their Primarch. Besieging his comrade to raise the storm against the War Master, Duquesne's last moments would be spent rallying the Iron Hands to seek vengeance against their betrayers. His final request to his most cherished brother not to forget him, nor their deeds made in service to the Iron Tenth.
Gabriel Santor served as the first captain of the Iron Hands during the Horus Heresy. Born on Medusa, Santor became captain of the Averni clan and commanded the elite honor guard of the Iron Hands known as the Morlocks. As the equerry to his Primarch, Santor would act as counsel to the Gorgon and cool Ferrus Manus' legendary temper, ensuring cohesion within the Legion. During the fall of the Lords of Gardenal, Gabriel would be severely wounded, leading to him undergoing several bionic replacements to the left side of his body. Unlike many of his brother Astartes, Santor did not hold to the belief of the Creed of Iron, believing that although the flesh of man was weak, it was a burden to shoulder, allowing the solidarity and promotion of strength to lesser men of the Imperium armed forces, such as the Imperial Army, whom would serve with the Iron Hands on numerous occasions. Santor also believed, alike to his cousins of the Ultramarines, that when the Crusades would be won, the Astartes would need to lay down their arms and pursue lives of duty and statesmanship, even if only as honor guards or statues within the Imperial Palace, relics of an age of war giving way to an age of prosperity and peace. Santor would also be the sole survivor of Fulgrim's betrayal aboard the Iron Hands flagship, the Fist of Iron, and meet his end at the hands of Emperor's Children First Captain Julius Caesaron during the Istvan V Dropside Massacre.
On the bridge, dripping blood that wasn't all his own, Shadrach had taken the last message of Amadeus Duquesne, his old friend, his commander from the very start. "The Gorgon's dead!" Duquesne had yelled at him over the link, the image of him fracturing and breaking up. "My lord, he's dead! He's gone! Fulgrim butchered him! They're all dying, Shadrach! It's a bloody massacre! An obscenity!" "My lord, move your ship clear of the line!" "Too late, boy. The drive's gone for good. Hull plates are splitting. They're inside with us." The image blinked away for a second. Then it had come back. "Emperor Rust!" "Say again, my lord." "I said, do you remember Rust? Fates, you were there. You were one of the first, Shadrach, one of my Stormwalkers from the very start. Emperor's bloody own." "Yes, my lord." "Then don't you forget Rust, boy. Don't you lie down and die, not ever. You know what kind of horror that horde fight was. Millions of the greenskin bastards. But we raised the storm. We raised the bloody storm. We prevailed." The Lord Commander's voice had become a brittle screech. Shadrach had not been sure if it was through pain or the strangling distortion of the vox. "My lord! Lord Commander Duquesne!" The image blinked on and off, choppy and broken. "Raise the storm, Shadrach! Raise the bloody storm, my boy! Tell the Tenth to raise the storm and take every last one of those bastards to hell!" Among the Legiones Astartes, commanders of great repute have been born of the most bitter struggles. Forged of dire circumstance, were it not for such singular warriors, humanity would not have the strength to push back the tide of darkness. For today, we shall elucidate such an honored figure whom embodied the values, ideals, and glory of his legion. The war leader of the Iron Tenth, Shadrach Medusan. Born on Holy Terra, the Astartes known as Shadrach Smith would be raised from the ancient Terran region of Albia. Inducted into the 10th Legion during the latter period of the Wars of Unification, Smith would serve for over 200 years with distinction. Deployed during the compliance of the Afric and Pan-Pacific regions of Terra, Shadrach would serve under the Lord Commander of the 10th Legion, Amadeus Duquesne, during his formative years as an Astartes. Gaining glory for the so-called Stormwalkers during the Battle of Rust against the Orxenos, Medusan would grow a bond of immense trust and loyalty with the Lord Commander of the Legion. With the 10th's reunion of their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, on the world of Medusa, Shadrach would expunge his Terran surname of Smith to honor the Gorgon. Now known as Medusan, Shadrach would seek to emulate the heritage and teachings of the Gorgon as a true son of Medusa. Eagerly adopting the changes to the Iron Tenth, Shadrach would seek to embody the most venerated qualities of the newly forged Iron Hands and become a true disciple of his Genefather's teachings. Proving himself worthy of his new name and heritage, Shadrach would earn glory for his legion during many engagements of the Great Crusade. Taking command of contingents of the Legion during battles such as the Purge of Caldera, in the stead of both Ferrus Manus and First Captain Gabriel Santor, Medusan would demonstrate a deep understanding of battle line tactics and anchor formations. Orchestrating the killing blow against the Eldar forces during the battle, with the return of Santor's command of the Legion, the First Captain would refuse to interfere with his well-laid strategies and allow Medusan to remain in command of the battle. Aiding Medusan with permission to command his Morlock Terminators during the battle, Santor would lead his men into the final push to win victory for the Iron Tenth. Promoted to the rank of captain of the 10th Company, the Sorgul clan, Medusan would facilitate command instructions ordained from his senior officers and Primarch to his lower-ranking battle brothers. Yet despite his flawless achievements and victories, Shadrach Medusan's fortunes would soon begin to sour. With the open rebellion of the Primarch of the 16th Legion, Horus Lupercal, the Iron Hands would be sent forth by the Emperor to crush the War Master's upstart coup. With Primarch Ferrus Manus in command of the fleet of Salamanders, Raven Guard, Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Wordbearers and Alpha Legion, victory would be assured with the collective might of 7 legions against the already divided and scarred 4 traitor legions. Yet as the initial assault of loyalists began to enact their retribution of the traitors on the world of Istvan V, the seemingly destined victory in the name of the Emperor would turn. With the second wave of Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Wordbearers and Alpha Legion turning on their allies, the Loyalists would be massacred. In orbit of the battle, Shadrach would watch the unfolding betrayal aboard the vessel Ironside. Assigned as commander of the Orbital Reserve by his most trusted senior officer and battle brother, Duquesne, Shadrach's men would be ready to aid the second wave assault against the traitors. Yet such an assault would never come to fruition as Medusan and his men looked on in horror at the deceit and cowardice of their own brothers-in-arms. The outcome of the battle clearly destined to be a catastrophic loss for the Loyalists, Medusan would attempt to rescue of the embattled Loyalist legions. Yet before a rescue could be enacted, the traitor fleets in orbit of Istvan would attack the Ironside. Defending from boarding actions conducted by the Death Guard and Sons of Horus legions, Medusan would lead the defense of the Ironside. Successfully repelling the boarding actions of the traitors, Medusan would nonetheless lose his left hand during the engagement. With his return to the bridge and staunching of his wound, Medusan would receive a communication from his mentor and friend, Amadeus Duquesne. Informed of the death of his Primarch, Ferrus Manus, Shadrach would be ordered by his most cherished friend to raise the storm against the traitors. Duquesne's vessel would soon after detonate in an immense explosion, prompting Medusan to make the difficult decision to flee from the doomed war zone of Istvan V. The deaths of his gene-father, first captain, and greatest compatriot, Duquesne, weighing heavily on his mind. The Iron Tenth, in a single moment, had been shattered into pieces. The shards of the Legion, scattered across the galaxy, fleeing in disarray, now leaderless and broken in spirit, would appear to be unsalvageable. Harboring the majority of the Legion's clan fathers, a council would be convened for the fathers to take collective command of the Iron Hands, with the absence of the senior officers of the Legion. Medusan would challenge such a decision as impractical, in opposition to a singular leader, focusing the remaining Iron Tenth into a focused goal and vision. Despite his protestation, Shadrach would defer to the leadership of the Iron Fathers due to the involvement of his own Iron Father, Jabez Org. Attempting to reorganize the scattered Legion and compartmentalize their forces strictly into each company. Yet due to the overwhelming sacrifice of the first clan, Averni, during the Dropsite massacre, they would lack the numbers viable enough to follow such a structure. Further exacerbating problems, the Iron Tenth now harbored small units of the 18th and 19th Legions. Heeding the counsel of Medusan, these orphans of war would be incorporated into the Iron Tenth to aid in the diversification of war strategies and tactics. Clan Sorgol would incorporate the Averni, Salamanders, and Raven Guard into the fold. Termed thereafter as their detractors as the Mongrel Clan, this ragtag assortment of warriors would be commanded by Iron Father Jabez Org, with Medusan serving as his hand-elect second-in-command. For soon, this new disparate band of Astartes would be tested, with the Iron Hands receiving a transmission from a group of survivors of the Istvan V betrayal. Hastily intercepting the distress signal of their imperiled brothers, the Iron Hands would be lured into a trap laid by the Sons of Horus, led by the captain of the 18th Company, Tybalt Mar. In the ensuing naval battle, the flagship of the Broken Iron Hands, Crown of Flame, would be destroyed, killing the collective Iron Fathers' Council in the process. Mar would demand the surrender of the Loyalists, yet Iron Father Jabez Org would engage the Sons of Horus aboard his war vessel, Ironheart. Closing into boarding range, Medusan would lead the charge to slay Mar and bring his severed head to the Iron Father. Teleporting onto the Sons of Horus flagship, Clan Sorgol would valiantly fight to reach the bridge of the warship. Despite their wrath and the damage left in their wake, the Iron Hands would be unsuccessful in bringing Mar to justice. The Ironheart would be scarred by the 16th Legion, with Jabez Org gravely injured during the battle. As the Iron Tenth retreated to tend to their wounds, command would fall to Medusan to lead his once more demoralized and damaged forces. Given the title of War Leader by Jabez Org, Medusan now commanded arguably the largest remaining contingent of the Legion. Liaising with the Astartes of his cousin legions and consolidating the Iron Hands, Medusan would adopt a more flexible approach to warfare in order to preserve the remaining survivors of the Dropsite massacre. Under his command, the Iron Tenth would need to adapt should they not wish to perish. As war leader, Medusan would assign 4 Astartes to act as his hands-elect. Breaking with tradition, Medusan would bequeath the title to a representative of both Clan Sorgol and Averni, and an Astartes of the Salamanders and Raven Guard. transmitting a wideband message to the Sons of Horus, Medusan would vow to one day kill Tybalt Mar and avenge his legion, proclaiming his name to the traitors, lest they forget that the survivors of Istvan V were a force to be reckoned with, and under his command they would not be found wanting for blood and vengeance. Striking the traitor forces during naval battles for several years of the Horus heresy, Shadrach Medusan and his band of Astartes would harass and hound the War Master's forces. Alike to the tales of the boogeymen of ancient terror, the shattered legions under Medusan would aid the loyalist war effort by crippling supply lines, reinforcements, and strike forces of the enemy, bolstering his forces' effectiveness by incorporating the strengths of each legion under his command. Medusan's raiders would prove an effective thorn in the sides of the traitors to the throne, gradually gathering small bands of survivors of the Istvan betrayal into their ranks. The guerrilla warfare of the Orphans of War would gain further momentum, aiding the penitent White Scars atoning for their acts of betrayal under the command of Hibu Khan. Medusan's forces would save the Sagyamazan from certain death and incorporate their forces into his own. Assembling an army sizing 58 battalions in strength, Medusan would also embed a portion of his forces into the world of Dwell in order to ally its populace of 8 million strong to combat the War Master's forces. Wounding the Sons of Horus captain, Horus Aximand, and attempting to assassinate the War Master by hiding Astartes strike teams within the Imperial Army defenses, Medusan, though unsuccessful in preventing the planet's annihilation by overwhelming traitor firepower, would nonetheless prove to be a deadly opponent. Orchestrating other assassination attempts against Primarchs Mortarion and Fulgrim subsequently, though again unsuccessful, they would manage to injure the Primarchs. Infuriated at the 10th's continued resilience and near-deadly attempts on the Primarchs' lives, the War Master would dispatch a portion of his legion and assign them to destroy Medusan's band of warriors. Commanded by Captain Tybalt Mar, the personal vendetta between the war leader and the Iver would come to a deadly conclusion. Despite Medusan's notoriety gained in the wake of the Battle of Dwell, the war leader and his forces would bide their time before striking once more. So far-reaching was the war leader's reputation, the Primarch of the Alpha Legion, Alpharius, would even assume his identity during his infiltration of the Shattered Legions. Yet with the end of the Horus heresy drawing near, Medusan's raids would resume with continually escalating brutality and wrath. Despite his efforts, the Iron Hands under Medusan's command would be ensnared by madness and desperation due to their legion's continued misfortune. A coup of Iron Hands would attempt to usurp Medusan's command, guided in their actions by their self-proclaimed allegiance to the spectre of Ferrus Manus. The cult of the Gorgon would construct a golem facade of the Gorgon, utilizing his own severed hand in the construction of their heretical totem of the Primarch. Yet with the intervention of the Primarch of the Salamanders, Vulcan, during his pilgrimage to Holy Terror, the mechanical puppet adorned with the trappings of the Gorgon would be sundered. As the cult of the Gorgon fell to ruin, Medusan would pardon his brother's treachery, orchestrated in part by his own Iron Father, Jebez Org. Continually clashing with Tybalt Mar's larger battle fleet, Medusan would seek the aid of Vulcan in his crusade against the Sons of Horus. Yet with his own destiny to fulfill, the Primarch of the 18th would decline Medusan's offer. Enabling Vulcan's traversal to Holy Terror, Medusan would, in the wake of the cult of the Gorgon and dealings with Vulcan, resolve to end his bitter rivalry with Mar. Committing his forces to a final battle against the Sons of Horus, despite Jebez Org's protestation, Medusan would openly engage the Sons of Horus during the Battle of Arisak. Leading a boarding action against Mar's flagship, Lupercal's Pursuivant, his men would tragically be ambushed by the cunning captain of the 18th Company. Iron Father Jebez Org would abandon the war leader and withdraw from the battle with the remainder of the Shattered Legion's fleet. Bound in chains, Medusan would be brought before Tybalt Mar, and alike to his gene father, be decapitated by the traitor scum. His duty to drag the traitors to the throne to the depths of hell ended in ignominy.
Medusan came around in a dank cell in the bowels of the Lupercal Pursuivant. Makosa glanced across at him from the other side of their confinement. He had a blade to his neck, angled down towards the heart, and 2 renegades held him fast. He saw no sign of the other warriors who had survived the ambush in the sword hall. "Let him go," Medusan demanded, the pain in his skull where Ma had struck him a dull ache. He had minders too, and felt the pressure of augmented strength against his shoulders. The champion again. "No," said a voice from the shadows, and Tybalt Ma stepped forwards. He gestured to Makosa, and then to his warriors. "Kill him." Medusan roared, but they slew Makosa without hesitation. The gladius came out of his neck slick and heady with transhuman blood. Medusan strained against his keepers, the veins in his neck bulging with effort, but was held fast. "A little oil in there, perhaps," said Ma with a smirk. "Bastard! What have you done with the rest of my men? Answer me!" Ma drew close, gesturing casually to Makosa. "They share his fate." "I'll kill you! I'll bloody well kill you!" He struggled again, and felt the sword tip draw blood. Ma merely looked his prey in the eye. Medusan snarled through gritted teeth. "My warriors are coming! I will be avenged!" "You will kill me, or your warriors will kill me? Which is it?" "Either way, you'll be dead!" Ma nodded, then motioned to the guards. "Get him on his feet." Medusan felt the pain of his injuries flare in anger as he was hauled up. Ma took another step. Their noses almost touched. "Taller than I expected," he said. "It really is you, isn't it? I wanted to be sure. I had to be sure. But it's you this time." "I'll kill you," Medusan seethed. "You've said that already. I expected better, if I'm honest. Something..." He frowned, trying to find the right word, and settled for a lesser one. "More." "You filth. Fight me. Prove who is the stronger. It's what you want." Ma stepped back. "Oh, that's better. Trying to find a way out. Your strategy is flawed, though, because you're wrong, Shadrach. You turned this into something personal. An oath sworn to your men, or more likely yourself. A vendetta. I, Tybalt Ma, your nemesis. I never cared about you, Medusan. But I had to be sure. I say that twice, so you know why I've kept you alive this long. It's not because you're a worthy foe, and I wanted to fight you in some vainglorious arena of death. I had to know you weren't coming back to haunt me like you did before. I don't want to duel." He frowned, as if the very idea was distasteful, or prove my worth. "There's no honor in putting down a beaten dog. It's just mercy. I just need you dead." Medusan snarled, defiant to the end. "I hope you choke on my blood, you scum-eating wretch. You will never break us. The Iron Tenth will endure. We will end..." Ma drew his sword. It took one blow to cut off Medusan's head. Tybalt Ma reached down to grasp the Iron Hand's severed head by the scalp. "Like father, like son," he muttered. Isn't that the phrase?
Ortec Moore served as an Iron Father of the Iron Hands Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Infamous for his deeds during the era of the Emperor's conquest of the stars, Ortec's reputation as a bitter tyrant amongst his kin is well earned. Regularly at odds with the ideals and commands of his Primarch, Ferrus Manus, this Terran-born Astartes would be rumored to bear genetic abnormalities at odds with that of his liege lord, though such speculation has never been confirmed. A veteran of the reconquest of the Sol system prior to his legion's reunion with the Gorgon of Medusa, Ortec's renown as a great weaponsmith paled when compared to his infamous acts of fratricide. Seizing the Medusan Leviathan Crawler, belonging to the outlaw Ragoln clan upon his arrival to the world of his Primarch, the Knight of Slaughter enshrined Ortec as an Iron Lord, worthy of founding his own clan company. As master of the Morrigal clan, Ortec inherited the outcasts and detritus of Medusa into his ranks, his band of volatile misfits unworthy of membership to any of the more prestigious, and valiant clan companies. Clad in the panoply known as the Armis Panopticos, constructed by his own hand, this heavy battleplate, outfitted with Auspex cogitator networks, additional limbs, and interfaced with his neural interface matrices tattooed onto his skin. Such augmetics enhance the blood-wrought senses, enabling him to feel sensation through his ceramite. Wielding an immense double-headed halberd known as Orgonikos, this badge of office of Clan Morgul, forged from the ferro-alloys of the ancient forges of Damas, has vaporized and rendered countless foes. Unwilling to allow any slights to fester among his clan company, all who opposed the so-called blood-wrought perished in duels of honor. Witness to the betrayal of the Istvan V dropsite massacre during the Horus Heresy, Moore's attempts to reach the battle lines of the surface from his orbital position within his flagship, the Red Talon, came to no avail. The Gorgon's decision to keep the clan of outsiders far from the front lines of battle, allowing for their survival. Little would Ferrus Manus realize that these outcasts, unbefitting the true stature of the Iron Tenth, would soon encompass a large majority of its surviving remnants. Fleeing from the destruction, ravaging the now shattered legions of the Urgal Depression, the Red Talon suffered heavy damage and spurred Ortek Moore to wage a war of his own devising. Ignoring the demands of the War Council of Terra and allegiance with his own Terran officer, Shadrach Medusan, Clan Morgul, under the leadership of Ortek Moore, waged cruel campaigns against the traitor legions and their allies. Conducting a merciless campaign of unrestrained annihilation upon the worlds choosing to bend the knee to the War Master's cause, Clan Morgul fell upon the wearied forces of the traitor legions in the wake of their conquests. Unleashing nuclear warheads upon the hive cities of the Gethsemane Colonus within the Cyclops cluster of space, the destruction wrought by the maimed of the Iron Tenth rendered the world uninhabitable for generations. Reserving the most despicable means of destruction for those planets which submit with no loss of lives, the irascible dissidents of Medusa allowed none to be spared from their blades and bolters. Though harsh in their methods, the blunt effectiveness of the so-called Red Talons had formed a bulwark between the traitors and loyalist bastions, saving millions of innocent lives. Their contemporaries of Clan Sorgol, led by their war leader, suffering a more ignoble fate as the war raged. Aiding the Imperial Fists during the Battle of Bot against the World Eaters Legion, the destruction of this recruitment world proved a target too valuable to ignore. Shunting its orbiting moon from its course to allow its collision with the planet in a spectacle of destruction far in excess of any ordnance possessed by the guns of their fleet, the Iron Hands invaded as the countdown of the world's extinction loomed. Unleashing mass drop pod assaults upon the surface alongside the sons of Rogul Dawn, Clan Morgul overran the starport Tridasimia. Securing a genetic stasis casket etched with the gene rights of the Emperor, Ortek Moore personally recovered this priceless artifact before ordering all Loyalist forces to fall back within their Storm Eagle and Thunderhawk gunships. Watching the world of Bot become consumed by purging flame as its moon finally crashed into the surface, all who remained turned to ashes within the carnage. Surviving the Great Civil War for humanity's soul, following the retreat of the traitors from the Throne World, a new era of Space Marines would be established. Dividing the Loyalist legions into smaller chapters, each led in turn by a famed war leader of the heresy, Ortek Moore assumed the mantle of Chapter Master of his newly founded Red Talons during 021.M31. Inheriting the bold and aggressive legacy of their imposing leader and the deeds of his warband during the era of the Horus Heresy, the Red Talons to this day enact campaigns of bloody and uncompromising slaughter. The fate of their founder lost to history, his legacy regardless outlives many a noble clan company of the Iron Tenth, who have fallen to ruin and irrelevance.
Crius served as Iron Father of the Iron Hand's first Vexilla during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. As Lord of Cadaran and Solar Emissary of the Gorgon, Crius would serve the Iron Tenth for 2 centuries before his secondment
to the throne world. A member of the Crusader host, representatives drawn from each legion and stationed on Holy Terra, Crius would be imprisoned beneath Kamba Mawu with the news of Horus Lupercal's betrayal of the Imperium at Istvan III. Isolated for many months, Crius would be relocated to the void ship Oathbound and be interrogated by the Templars of the Imperial Fists, Boreas and Sigismund. Informed of the death of his Primarch, Ferrus Manus, more than 200 days following his execution upon the Urgal depression of Istvan V, the Imperial Fist Primarch Rogel Dawn would task the Forgotten Iron Father with a mission to unite the fragments of his legion to aid in the defense of Terra. Released from his shackles, Crius would be dispatched alongside Boreas to locate and recruit the shattered remnants of the 10th Legion to the Loyalist cause. Venturing across the stars within the Oathbound, the shipmaster, Castera, would receive a transmission of an image of a mountain icon known to the Iron Tenth as Ignorak. Answering the summons of his kin, Crius would traverse to the location of the vast void ship, Thetis. Embarking upon the vessel of onyx and iron, Boreas and Crius would meet with the 12 Iron Hands Astartes within. Conversing with the leader of the Istvan survivors, Athanatos, Crius and Boreas would relay the demands of Rogel Dawn. Rejecting the Praetorian of Terra's request, the crew of the Thetis would explain that their transmission was not a summons, but bait laid to entice traitors into their grasp. Seeking to perish in a last defiant stand against their enemies, the Iron Tenth would wait within the sweltering heat of the Thetis to meet the traitors with every weapon at their disposal. Resolving to stand at their side, Crius would prepare for the oncoming traitor assault. Surrounded by 4 vessels of the Sons of Horus, Spearstrike, Wolf of Cathonia, Dawnstar, and Death's Child, combined they would harbour over 2,000 traitor Astartes. En route to meeting with the ship's commander, Phidias, Crius and Boreas would discover a disturbing secret within the Thetis. Within a former weapons cache, configured to act as a hibernation pod, the freezing temperatures would harbour an army of revenants. Athanatos stood within a tomb of ice as Crius realized that his kin were in fact all deceased. Resurrected by Phidias, using the Keys of Hell, a relic of Old Night from the 10th Legion's past techno-heresies. Disgusted at Athanatos' abominable existence, Boreas would mortally injure both Iron Hands, yet be knocked unconscious by Crius in the struggle. Watching Athanatos finally embrace the endless sleep, Crius would release the undead Astartes from their tombs before collapsing from his own wounds. Aided by the Oathbound, the tide of battle would turn as the Voidcraft of the 7th sent the Sons of Horus into disarray. The Oathbound would be destroyed by the Spear Strike as both vessels split each other apart with their broadsides. Swarming the remaining ships, the Wolf of Cathonia and Death's Child, waves of the undead Iron Tenth would board the Sons of Horus vessels and cleanse a path with unfeeling tides of destruction. Victorious, Phidias would awaken Crius, now reborn alike to his revenant kin. Sending Boreas to Terra in chains via a Storm Eagle piloted by servitors, the Iron Father would give Boreas one final message to transmit should the dead of Istvan be needed to defend the Imperium. The keyword to bring them to bear being Waken. Leading his army of undead Astartes into the fray once more, Crius would recall the words once spoken to him by his Primarch. The machine is strong, and logic can lay open any realm of understanding. But without the hands and minds of the living, they are nothing. We live and bend iron to our will, but iron can break, machines fail, and logic can become corrupted. Life is the only true machine. Cut too much away, and we lose ourselves. Remember that, Crius. Ferrus Manus is dead,
Yet the dead must walk. For vengeance, they remember. The dead remember.
Cardosia served as an Iron Father of the Iron Hands Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Absent from the Dropsite Massacre of Istvan V, upon learning of the death of his Primarch Ferrus Manus, Cardosia would command his patrol cruiser, Light of Battle, to target the supply convoys and warships of the War Master's fleet. Successfully harrying the traitor legions for years, such raids would end with the traitor forces amassing within the Beta Garman system, to which Cardosia would plan his next actions of reprisal. Hoping to make a direct path to invade Terra, the traitors would be stopped by masses of loyalist warbands and legion forces as one of the largest battles of the Civil War erupted. Traversing through the warp to aid the embattled forces of Beta Garman, Cardosia's lieutenant, the librarian Dalvez, would contact the Raven Guard chief librarian, Balsar Kafuri. Traveling alongside his Primarch, Corvus Corax, aboard the battle barge Avenger, Kafuri would pass along Cardosia's request to meet with the Raven Lord to broker an alliance to fight within Beta Garman. Meeting aboard the Avenger, Corax would decry such a battle as a lost cause due to Horus Lupercal leading the traitor forces in the system, personally. Stating that even a doomed cause would be worth fighting should it even spill a drop of blood, Cardosia would not allow the War Master to reach Holy Terra unscathed. Parting waves with the Raven Lord, Cardosia would order the Light of Battle to traverse directly to Beta Garman and give their lives to stall Horus's forces, even if only for a brief moment. For no son of the Gorgon would allow the War Master's tyranny to continue, even should they lay down their lives to impede his conquest. The fate of Cardosia lost henceforth, his resolute defiance befitting a true Iron Father of the Iron Tenth. Standing at his command lectern, Captain Jerun Atticus raised his bionic rasp of a voice over the din of alarms and the rumble of secondary blasts.
Damage report, Sergeant Galba.
Void shield collapse over port stern, Captain. Fire in that landing bay and in the surf barracks.
Seal the sector. Divert its power to the shields.
Galba looked up from his post just beneath the lectern. Captain, the survivors. Atticus silenced the sergeant with a sharp gesture.
They're dead either way. Anyone in that sector is a casualty. Let's not add to their numbers. Do it, damn you.
Damn the arithmetic of war. Damn Horus. Damn the turncoat cowards who are filling the near orbit of Istvan V with the wreckage of ships, the flames of treachery, and the ruin of the Emperor's dream.
And damn me too,
Atticus muttered. Galba paused over his controls. Captain?
Nothing.
But it wasn't nothing, was it? What was it he had said to his men, laughing with that bionic larynx of his? Laughing as the Veritas had begun its journey through the warp to the Istvan system. He had said that it was not true that the legions knew no fear, because he had a great one, and his fear was that they would arrive to find their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, had already crushed the War Master's rebellion without them. After Kalinades, after Fulgrim's craven ambush, and after the warp storms had calmed, Lord Manus had raced hard for Istvan, taking the fastest, least damaged ships, and filling them with his most experienced Averni veterans. Atticus had given over half his complement of warriors to the Primarch's folly, but now, the Veritas Ferrum had finally dropped out of the warp at the system's Mandeville point, and into a vision of hell. Atticus descended from the lectern and strode to the Oculus. Littering the far orbit of the Istvan star was a graveyard of loyalist ships. Some had been caught as they attempted to escape, but many more were simply torn apart by enemy fire as soon as they emerged from the Immaterium. The Iron Hand's second wave had been virtually obliterated.
Hard to starboard,
he ordered, sweeping his eye over his crew.
Will none of you ask if I am relieved that my fear has not come to pass?
The battle was not over, but the terrible truth was that it seemed as though it soon would be. He jabbed a finger at the nearest enemy ship that hove into view as the Veritas began its turn.
I want everything hitting that Alpha Legion bastard.
If he still had lips, they would have parted in a murderous smile.
So the individual is unimportant, is it, Alfarius?
He spat.
Then what we're about to do won't hurt you at all.
With the slow majesty of a glacier, the Veritas rounded on its prey. The Alpha Legion ship the Theta tried to evade by rising above the ecliptic, but it was too slow and too late. Concentrated lance and torpedo fire from the Veritas overwhelmed its void shields. They went down in a flickering cascade, and the Theta's running lights died just before the Iron Hand's main barrage struck it amidships. The blow was devastating. The Theta broke in half. Galba called out from his station.
"The Night Lord's vessel is firing again."
Noted, Sergeant. Countermeasures.
Atticus looked at the bisected cruiser before them.
Helmsman,
He ordered.
take us through.
Darun Atticus served as a captain of the Iron Hands Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Commander of the 111th Clan Company and strike cruiser Veritas Ferrum, this largely bionic Astartes followed the arithmetic of war with little regard for the meager remnants of emotion which rebelled at his actions. Badly burned by an energy weapon salvo, which breached the bridge of his warship prior to the dawn of the 31st millennium, Darun retained only a single eye of his ruined face to remind him of the weakness of flesh. Deployed as part of the second wave to the Ispan system to aid his Primarch Ferrus Manus' purge of the rebellious warmaster, Horus Lupercal, Atticus bristled at the notion that his delayed arrival to the system had likely robbed him of glory, putting down the rabble of traitors. Finding a graveyard of loyalist ships littering the system's Mandeville Point, Darun ordered a masterful attack of the Alpha Legion cruiser, Theta, utterly destroying the Voidcraft before turning his attention to oncoming Night Lord aggressors. Heavily outnumbered, against his better judgment, Atticus rescued survivors of the Dropside Massacre, led by Salamander Sergeant Kidem of the 139th Company, losing more of his own men than those retrieved from the fray. Callousing the final remnant of humanity left in his heart, Atticus and his band of beleaguered Orphans of War enacted a perilous warp jump as the Veritas Ferrum's exposed hull endangered the integrity of the vessel. Arriving within the Pandorax system in orbit above the planet of Pythos, Atticus contacted what remained of his legion within Lifocast reach as they resolved to fight as independent fragments of the Broken Legion, with the spawning of the Ruin Storm, which now bisected the galaxy. Alike to a cancer eroding the enemy from within, rather than the hammer blow they had been. Before the Iron Hands could ready for warp translation, an anomaly on the surface of Pythos destroyed the Veritas Ferrum's Auspex. Descending onto the jungle canopies below, the coalition of Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders were set upon by strange phenomena as blood ran uphill and large creatures known as Saurians set upon their number. All creatures of the planet showing predatory traits despite many bearing appearances that befit herbivores, waves of moss clustered together as even the plant life of Pythos sought to devour the Astartes. Finding upon a black column as the source of the strange warp phenomena, as the Astartes fended off 8-foot-tall Saurians, withdrawal was the only choice to prevent further casualties. Establishing a base of operations upon the landing site of Pythos, Captain Atticus would not allow the flesh of monsters to best his steel, despite Japtasurf screaming as they hallucinated creatures from beyond the Pale. Informed of an Emperor's Children fleet which had pursued the Veritas Ferrum from Isvan V, Atticus and his men briefly ventured to the neighboring Hamartia system to confront their nemesis. Ambushing the lead Voidcraft, Kalidora, the Iron Hands infiltrated the vessel using boarding torpedoes before pushing through to the bridge, Atticus felling the ship's captain and ordering Tech Marine Camnus to crash the ship onto the nearby planetoid of Creon. Returning to Pythos, the Iron Hands found civilian ships descending upon the planet, the pilgrims originating from the sundered world of Darwin, destroying their Voidcraft upon reaching the surface as they proclaimed Pythos to be their prophesied new home. As Saurians began to harry the populace, the Astartes begrudgingly intervened due to the civilians' lackluster methods of defending themselves, the compassion of the Salamanders proving to be an exploitable weakness. Firebombing the jungle surrounding the Black Column, as the Pilgrims of Darwin created a lodge within proximity of the peculiar structure, the Iron Hands received further worrying reports of the civilians muttering in their sleep. Warp storms surrounding the planet, preventing the Astartes' escape. The Iron Hands ordered the Pilgrims to aid their excavation surrounding the column before delving into the depths below, finding a temple which could not have been made by conventional means. Set upon by a tide of maggot-like creatures which drove the Astartes back to the surface, Atticus assured he was the last to climb from the depths before ordering his men above to purge what followed him with flamers. The Pilgrims of Darwin revealing themselves to be worshippers of the ruinous powers, as the Iron Hands gunned down the priest, Sirek, the immense sacrifice of blood summoned the dormant being which had lurked beneath Pythos. Madael the Undivided destroyed the Iron Hands with nary a wound incurred. No bolter nor gunship ordnance capable of harming the greater demon, as it delighted in the slaughter perpetrated by its own hand and the Saurians which now tore apart the cultists, willingly walking into their midst. Seeking atonement for his failure, Atticus would not let the 111th Clan Company die quietly, leading the last band of Astartes as they carved through lesser demons in order to confront Madael. Clashing with the greater demon, Atticus perished by Madael's hands. His refusal to give in to the weakness of flesh, even in the face of pure evil, a testament to his legion's creed.
Ulrach Branfan served as a captain of the Iron Hands Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Commanding the 65th Clan Company of the Iron Tenth, Ulrach's deeds prior to the Civil War for humanity would be lost to time. As a survivor of the Dropside Massacre of Istvan V, Branfan would, despite being severely injured during the battle, rally many of his legion and orphans of the 18th and 19th Legions to board the void ship, the Sisypheum. Escaping the Istvan system, Ulrach would be treated for his injuries by the apothecaries of the Sisypheum. Losing both legs, one arm, and receiving multiple mortal injuries during the battle, his body would be broken beyond all hope of repair. Yet with no dreadnought chassis or sarcophagus available to house their valiant captain, the Iron Hands would look to the past for a means to heal their commander. Clamping the Dark Age of Technology artifact, the Heart of Iron, to Ulrach's body, the parasitic mechanism would at first seem unresponsive, yet with closer observation, proved to slowly be regrowing Branfan's damaged organs. This miraculous regeneration would come at the cost of Branfan's vitality and would with time inevitably kill its subject. Sustaining Branfan within a stasis field, the now Orphans of War would seek guidance from their leader and harry the traitor legions across several war zones. Confronting the Iron Warriors and Emperor's children upon the world of Idris, they would deploy their stalwart ancient dreadnought, Karashi Bombastus, to destroy their foes. Felled by the Iron Warriors' warsmith dreadnought, Berossus, Bombastus's dreadnought chassis would be recovered by the Orphans of War and seem a fitting housing for their wounded leader. Yet without the integration of a dreadnought sarcophagus, the Orphans of War would integrate Ulrach's maimed body using a cable-wound cocoon and sutures of his exposed flesh. Joining his stalwart battle brothers one last time during their mission to retrieve the Primarch's genetic materials from the moon of Luna, the Orphans of War would make their final stand. Alongside his lieutenant, Cadmus Tyro, the Iron Hands commandos would face the Justaeran elite of the Sons of Horus and allow for the escape of Nikona Sharokin and the Magna Mater materials. Falling in battle, befitting a warrior of the Iron Hands, Branfan's long suffering would finally be over. His duty to his legion and Primarch, a monument to the endurance, strength, and fortitude of the Iron Tenth. Cadmus Tyro served as equerry to Captain Ulrach Branfan of the 65th Clan Company of the Iron Hands during the Horus Heresy. Surviving the Istvan V Dropside Massacre, Tyro would retreat from the planet aboard the Iron Hands vessel Sisypheum with a contingent of his legion. Assuming command of the Iron Hands whilst the wounded Captain Branfan underwent treatment within the Apothecarian stasis chambers, Tyro would lead his men alongside Shadrach Medusan, unaware that the visage of his battle brother was an imposter of the Alpha Legion. With the fake Medusan's true allegiance revealed, Tyro would organize his men's escape from the Hydra's trap, later taking part in the campaign of the War Orphans Loyalist Warband to procure the genetic material of the Primarchs, the Magna Mater. Alongside Atesh Tarsa, Ulrach Branfan, and Nikona Sharokin, Tyro would sacrifice his life at the side of his battle brother and captain, Branfan, to allow Sharokin to escape the facility with the Magna Mater. Facing the elite Justaeran guard of the Sons of Horus, Tyro's final moment would exhibit the stubborn defiance characteristic of the 10th Legion. His duty and dignity of his legion and Primarch Ferrus Manus, absolute.
Casterman Orff served as a spearhead centurion of the Iron Hands Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Among the most decorated warriors of the Iron Tenth, Casterman achieved much glory in the name of his clan company as an expert tank commander. Chosen to lead the Legion's subjugator armored battalions in the name of the Gorgon, despite incurring grievous injuries to his skull in battle, Casterman rebuilt much of his broken form with cybernetic augmentations. Deployed upon the accursed soil of Istvan V alongside his Primarch Ferrus Manus and the clan company veterans of Averni, Orff piloted his Fellblade super heavy tank, Brashemion, and laid waste to the forces of the Lupercal. Redeployed to lead the Loyalist flanking counterattack within the lighter Sikaran battle tank, Black Sun, Casterman's strategic brilliance for armored warfare, regardless, could not stem the tide of treachery. None know the true fate of this stalwart champion of the Iron Tenth, yet rumors persist that Casterman survived the atrocity of the Dropsite massacre. Said to have abandoned his name and rank, Casterman Orff, though injured in battle, refused to die and fought on for the remainder of the Great Civil War. His unquenchable thirst for vengeance forbidding him to perish, his future deeds have been lost to all Imperial records.
Karashi Bombastus served with the 65th Clan Company of the Iron Hands Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. A warrior of impassioned fury and possessed of a fierce temperament, Bombastus would be given the nickname Karashi, the namesake of the volcanic peak that harbored the Primarch of the Iron Hands during his infancy. Interred within a Contemptor-class dreadnought, Bombastus's aggression would only be enhanced with his transition into his sarcophagus. Safeguarding the shattered Legion warship, the Sisypheum under the command of Captain Ulrak Brantham, Bombastus would protect the War Orphans warband from threats perpetrated by the traitorous Emperor's children and Iron Warriors legions. Boarded during the incursion on the Crone world of Idris, Bombastus would defend his brethren and combat the Iron Warrior dreadnought Warsmith Berossus. Struck by Iron Warrior Cararis Grendel during his duel, Bombastus would be slain by Warsmith Berossus. Cut down without honor or dignity, unbefitting a stalwart guardian of the Iron Tenth.
Stronos looked back to the Yarg cage. Angered, the Yarg had unfolded from its hunch. It wound back its arms as if to strike, then, with a roar, it lunged with its entire body. The boy scrambled to get out of the way, the brushing contact with the beast still enough to fling him across the cage. The Yarg slammed into the bars where the boy had been, then sat back down to pick up the staff he had dropped and scratch its gums with it. Behind it, the boy picked himself up, giving no indication of the broken ribs Stronos could see he was carrying. Such a waste. Manpower was a resource like any other, and the whole bloody affair struck him as pointless. Perhaps this was the real reason he stayed away.
Would you like to know how I would fight such a beast?
He said to the old man.
Lord, I would.
The pistol. I would shoot the beast in the eyes before entering the cage, and then wait for it to bleed.
The old man looked up at Stronos, as though waiting on the explanation of the joke.
But, Lord, the honor of the...
Honorable men are beloved of those who make medals, and those who dig holes in the ground for the dead.
Stronos turned to leave. He had seen as much as he cared to.
My condolences for your nephew.
The Imperium of Man is beset by untold foes which span the length and breadth of the galaxy. Horrific abominations which require nothing short of total annihilation. It is no wonder that many of humanity's most stalwart defenders must weigh the fell scales of death to achieve victory, often at the cost of their reputation. For today, we shall elucidate the unorthodox war leader of the Iron Hands, Cardan Stronos. Originally a member of clans Dorvak and Vergan during his first near century of service to his chapter, the young Astartes, by the standards of the Iron Tenth, humbly assumed the rank of 10th Sergeant with his appointment to his new clan, Garsak. A veteran of many battles fought against the Xenos of the Tau Empire, Stronos had studied the tome detailing the early life of Ferrus Manus, the Canticle of Travels, seeking to learn from his long-slain Primarch of legend. Replacing his binaric ident codes and brands to mark his new clan of Garsak, aboard the cruiser the Aloyd, Stronos assimilated his senses into his new clade as a new symbol was added to his forge chain. Closer than typical brethren of other Astartes creeds, Clade Stronos could share private Vox channels, battle readiness, and even peer through one another's eyes, using inload-exload data streams. Deployed as his first campaign as 10th Sergeant on the world of Fenos, this thrall world within the domains of the Iron Hands had incited insurrection against their masters. Unwilling to allow word of the Dratus Skitaris rebellion to escape the territories of the Medusan system, the Iron Council awoke an ancient venerable dreadnought to oversee the campaign, Iron Father Tubric Ares. As Iron Captain Dravak led his men to a foothold upon the surface of Fenos, the 8,500-year-old dreadnought embarked to meet with his forces as Clade Stronos pushed to assault the port of Amadeus. Diverted from their primary objective by intel gleaned from Logi Legatus Nico Palpus, Stronos ordered his men to investigate a restricted access facility, which was said to house 3 invaluable Castellan battle robots. Cardan's rebellious quirk to think independently rather than as a cog in the machine, though earning the ire of Dravak, regardless allowed Clade Stronos to finish their search before supporting their captain's advance from their position. Finding no trace of the Castellans, Clade Stronos joined forces with their kinsmen as the main city of Fenos fell. The reason for the traitor Skitaris' defection, as of yet, unknown. As the Iron Hands resupplied and fortified their position, Stronos tended to among his only possessions, a defective Thunderfire cannon, its firing mechanism having jammed during his prior campaigns against the Tau. By order of Iron Father, Veros, Cardan for decades had meticulously tended to repairing the weapon to no avail. The impossible task acting as a form of meditation and lesson that some machine spirits are too stubborn to comply. Reflecting on the loss of lives caused by his actions, such as the 30,000 Skillian guardsmen used as cannon fodder during the War of Vergos VI, millions of souls who perished on Culedinus Sept, and firing squads formed to cull the already surrendered rebels of Skeptica Maxis. Troubled by his chapter's rigid adherence to the calculus of battle, Cardan wrestled with his conscience as ideals of a better future for the chapter began to bloom. For such contrarian ideals would soon be bolstered, with Iron Father Ares' orders to bid Stronos meet him within the Clan Garsak Landcrawler, Rule of One. Meeting with the assembled senior commanders of the campaign within the Hall of Audiences, including his former captain, Verox, Cardan Stronos and his brethren kneeled before the long-slumbered dreadnought. Said to have fought during the days of the Great Scouring against the traitors, Iron Father Ares, after 900 years of dormancy, had awoken to find his chapter in a state of weakness. Singling out Stronos as the only sergeant among captains and Iron Fathers, in Cardan, the venerable dreadnought saw a spark of recognition to his chapter of old. Asking for his tactical assessment, Ares listened to Stronos' plans to deploy scouts to clear Fenos' outposts and root out ambushers. His proposal cut short as the Landcrawler sustained fire from the rebels. Demanding that he personally fight upon the surface of Fenos to ensure swift destruction of its rebellion, as the Rule of One mobilized to the front lines, Ares ordered that Stronos must join him to convene with the Iron Council of Medusa. En route to the homeworld of Ferrus Manus, Cardan and Stronos began to form a bond of friendship with the quizzical engine seer Melatan Iolanes. His uncharacteristic kindness and dry wit for a son of the Gorgon, surprising the promising tech savant. Disembarking within the Medusan Felgafi Mountains to convene with the Iron Council, within the vault known as the Eye of Medusa, Stronos met with a long-distant friend, Epistolary Lydric. Seconded to serve within the Death Watch, the librarian spoke with Cardan as they observed an iron-glass mural of the legendary Astartes, Sabik Wayland, and Nicona Sharokin. Revealing his presence not to be mere coincidence, Lydric at the side of his Death Watch kin The Space Wolf, Ymir, and Death Spectre captain, Harsid, had traveled to the Medusan system to verify rumors of a secret Xenos weapons testing facility upon Venos. Asking Stronos to forward any knowledge of such a facility to Inquisitor Talala Yazir of the Ordo Xenos, should details be forthcoming within the Iron Council meeting, Cardan, despite viewing Lydric as possibly his only true friend, could not risk sharing the secrets of his chapter. Entering the Iron Council chamber by escort of a Hellfather Guardian, Stronos beheld in its center the suspended relic, the Axe of Medusa, as the councilmen linked their minds together. Witnessing the late arrival of the infamous Iron Father of Clan Raukan, Christos, to the meeting, Cardan surmised that Iron Hands could only be late intentionally to sow discord. The leader of the so-called Christosian Creed, infamous following his persecution made of the Eldar upon the world of Dawnbreak. Voting on the escalation of the Purge of Venos, though 20 councilmen including Ares voted in favor, 22 detractors, spurred by Christos and the Mechanicus voice of Mars, carried the day. Voicing his displeasure with the Iron Council, Cardan Stronos piqued the interest of Christos. Yet as the council disbanded to return to their duties of trade and logistical oversight, Ares bid Stronos to join him. Entering an ancient Simulus chamber, used only by the most senior of Iron Hands, Ares showed Stronos a simulacrum of Christos' actions during the Columnus campaign. Viewed from the perspective of Shadow Captain Orvid Stern, Stronos watched as Christos and his men allowed the Raven Guard to be sacrificed fighting the Orcs, as they slowly positioned to achieve optimal kill zones at Stern's expense. Slaying the war boss, Zagdraka, Christos coldly ignored the curses spat by Stern as he died, the experience leaving Stronos horrified at the callous waste of lives of his cousin Astartes, wrought by the cold logic of the calculus of war. Returning with Ares to Venos, with no aid from the other clans, Cardan resumed his role as leader of Clade Stronos. As Ares tore through the traitor Skitarii, with might befitting such a hulking Goliath, his time spent within the Simulus chamber had nonetheless inflicted its deadly flaw. Subsumed with the memory of his previous battle against the demon of Slaanesh, the Sapphire King, Ares stormed into the fray, ordering his subordinates to join him in glorious battle against his nemesis. Code-walling Ares' broadcasts to prevent further miscommunication, the Iron Hands, now isolated into clades, lost their advantage against the unified Skitarii. With no chain of command to take control, Stronos petitioned Engine Seer Yolanis to retrieve Ares' command protocols in order to rally his brethren, her successful objective allowing Ares to confer Stronos with the rank of Iron Captain as his mind fell further into mania. Connecting with Clade Jalingal, who believed Stronos to have perished in the fighting, the two clades joined forces as the remaining 20 demiclades refused to adhere to Stronos' hails. Supporting his advance with Predator, Whirlwind, and Vindicator Tankfire, Jalingal's efforts convinced the other clades to disable their code walls and follow Stronos' commands. Forcing the Skitarii to fall back, Stronos pursued after them with his clade as he ordered the remaining Iron Hands to fortify defensive positions in front of the interdiction line. Appointing sergeants to roles most optimal of their skills, rather than seniority, the unorthodox tactics of this de facto captain regardless achieved great results. Infiltrating the facility which housed the Xenos weapons experiments, Stronos ordered Scout Arven Ralph and his men to investigate, whilst his men drew the fire of the Imperator Titan defending its domains, the Pax Medusa. Discovering the missing Castellan robots within the facility, draped with flesh and human features, Ralph's men fell to bouts of madness as they witnessed a sermon of a malformed princeps tending to a flock of heretics. Outside the facility, the Pax Medusa fired upon Iron Father Ares, his insane charge against the Titan, folly even for a dreadnought of such lauded service. Yet as all hope of victory seemed lost, the Rule of One charged into the fray, its quake cannon firing at the Imperator Titan as the exchange of fire shook the earth. Warships of Clans Vergan, Raukan, and Garsak arrived in orbit, felling drop pods from the heavens, Warsmith Christos at their spear tip as he marched to Cardan Stronos' position. Rescinding Ares' command codes from Stronos, Captain Dravok ordered the clan monastery to disengage as Christos confronted the wayward 10th Sergeant. Accompanied by a Hellfather, Christos struck at Cardan. Stronos' bolter rounds shrugged off by Christos' Rosarius field generator as the enormous Terminator crashed into him. Killing all of Clade Stronos, save for Jarlingal and Burr, the Hellfather's wrath would be interrupted, incurring a bolter round to its head, fired by the Clanaverni veteran, Draf. Demanding answers regarding the fell artifacts within the facility, Draf perished at the hands of the headless Hellfather as it fired a volley of bolter rounds into his men. Tearing Stronos' helmet from his head as the hazardous air of Fenos damaged his face and lungs, Christos, though capable of ending Cardan's life, regardless saw potential in this rebellious Astartes and promised to rebuild Stronos stronger. Cardan's life, saved by Melitane Yolanis, who shared her rebreather with him until evacuation could be achieved. The injury to his face required the replacement of his jaw, teeth and mouth with a funnel-like vox emitter. Yet Stronos' replacement of the flesh had merely begun, and soon his path to ascend to the ranks of the Iron Council would begin. Sent to the Forge World of Mars to begin his 30-year training to become a Tech Marine of the chapter, Stronos' actions had cost him dearly and further shaken his faith in the calculus of battle. Training alongside the Knight of Dawn, Badass, Exsanguinator, Thessian, Angel Porphia, Baragiel, and Black Templar, Sigurd, this unlikely band of Astartes with time would form a bond which Stronos would come to cherish, though alien to that of his own chapter. Under the tutelage of Magos Uriel Phi, within the Skolum NL7 facility, Cardan quickly understood that his pedigree as an Iron Hand did not predestine him for greatness. Having taught countless Iron Fathers the secrets of Mars, including Christos, Uriel offered to conduct a surgery on Stronos to exceed his specialty as a Tech Marine above that of his peers. Enduring an excruciating surgery on his brain with no wish for pain suppressants, following the removal of the top of his skull, power to the facility fell, and Magos Uriel's attendant, Giel, murdered her by driving a metal suction tube into the back of her head. A servant of the Sapphire King, the menial gloated as Stronos remotely commanded the chamber's servitor to grab the assailant by the neck and crush the life from him. Resecuring his skull by fixing 17 10-centimeter long screws into the bone by hand, after 15 minutes of toil, Stronos stumbled from his operating room. Locating the source of the power outage, it would not take long for his aspiring Tech Marine brethren to rally at Stronos' position. Uncovering intel that another Dawnbreak cache resided upon Mars, Cardan briefed his battle brothers on the events of Fenos and actions of Iron Father Christos. Traversing to NL Primus to prevent further heretics being infected by the contagion of the Dawnbreak cache, with aid from the mysterious multi-headed creature recorded in Ferrus Manus' Canticles of Travel, Skolum NL7, Cardan and his ill-armed Astartes breached the facility. Reuniting with Melitane Yolanis, who had been assigned to oversee the cache due to her involvement on Fenos, the Astartes fought through waves of Skitarii and menial rebels as Stronos ventured to the heart of the contagion. Confronted by the Sapphire King, the demon born from the moment of Ferrus Manus' death, infused with emotions of betrayal and loss, flooded Stronos' mind with memories. Curling into a fetal position as tears streamed from his remaining organic eye, Stronos overcame the volatile emotional onslaught before crushing the Dawnbreak cache into pieces with his fists. The Sapphire King had been defeated this day, yet given time, Iron Father Christos would eventually succumb to its enticements, his Christosian creed undermined by the maverick master of the Forge, Malkan Feros, who in turn saw in Stronos a protege. Seeing in Cardan an exemplar of his creed, which had proven the antithesis of Iron Father Christos, Malkan Feros championed that a balance must be struck between logic and emotion. Taking Stronos under his wing and imparting him with the wisdoms he had earned over centuries of service to his chapter, with time, Cardan Stronos rose to the position of Iron Father and joined the Iron Council. Fighting as an equal to his more ancient kinsman, Stronos' reluctance to adhere to the calculus of battle pitted him once more against Iron Father Christos, the teachings of Malkan further widening the rift between the two. Fighting by the side of his cherished brother, Epistolary Lydric, for many years, Stronos fought the Emperor's children during the Gordinian heresy, and once again thwarted the schemes of the Sapphire King who had corrupted Iron Father Christos. A third of the council slain during the campaign, and untold battle brothers turned from the path of Ferrus Manus. Following the burning of Gordinia Prime, the Iron Hands investigated Iron Father Christos' prior campaigns as a matter of chapter integrity. The Christonian conclave conducted by the Iron Council, concluding that Christos' actions made against the Raven Guard were not of cold logic, but fueled by personal agendas and emotions. After centuries of debate, the conclave drew to a close during 460.M41, following the death of Christos. His surrender to the thrall of the ruinous powers, requiring a drastic examination of the chapter's ideals. Appointing Cardan as their elected war leader and de facto chapter master. For over 3 centuries, Stronos has served with distinction, with no cause to remove him from the position. Hateful of weakness and reverent of the machine despite his misgivings of the calculus of battle, Cardan Stronos' ruthless command is tempered with understanding that his chapter's emotions are an integral part of their function. Leading every clan company into battle, wielding the immense axe of Medusa, Stronos' leadership has seen to the destruction of the War of Dresgnod, purge of High Fleet Moloch from the Regis system, and destruction of the renegade Blood Herald's warband. Besting the World Eater Champion of Chaos, Varlag the Butcher, in single combat, despite requesting to rescind his leadership following his defeat against the Farsight Enclaves of 998.M41, the Iron Hands regardless reappointed him to the position of war leader. Present during the War of Beasts, fighting by the side of his brethren of the Brazen Claws chapter, with every concluded campaign, Stronos answers to the Iron Council upon ceding the position of chapter master back to their judgment. Reappointed at every meeting with the council, Cardan Stronos stands as the longest-serving ruler of the chapter in its recorded history, with only the Primarch himself exceeding Stronos' tenure as the master of the Iron Tenth. His service as their elected war leader likely to be unbroken until his duty is done.
Do not think you can defeat me so easily, Cardan Stronos,
they rasped in unison.
I am no creature of flesh. Everywhere, a child of Ferrus Manus is tormented by guilt or rage, be they Medusan, Calavelan, Ralcanan. I am there. This is what you would defy.
The servitors' bio-augments made their shoulders massive. Their biceps bulged with myosin scaffolds and actin ratchets, but the meat of their foundations had rotted long ago. Stronos shook them off, flesh tearing away in clumps, as their prodigious strength clattered piecemeal to the floor. Pushing through them, he advanced on the slumbering machine. For a moment, Stronos could see it, even without his eyes, and he felt it see him in return. Blue eyes as hard and ancient as precious stones drilled through the dark between them. A mane of long hair fell from a face that was at once hard and beautiful, shockingly inhuman, yet achingly empathic. His armor was faceted like a jewel, brilliant as a B-type star, draped with white-hot iron chains that spat and fizzled with the creature's core of fury. Crystalline wings folded partway over its breastplate. Its arms were folded. One hand was metal. Iron.
The Dawnbreak engine is not me.
The voice did not come from the servitors now. It came out of the darkness.
It is a skin I choose to wear, a vessel I choose to ride. You cannot break me with fists.
Stronos raised his gauntlets. His vision rained with sapphire after images.
Then I shall begin with your skin. It is as Master of the Forge Malkan Pharos says. A Titan is a mighty weapon of the Omnissiah, but without the fires of its reactor, it is but cold, dead metal.
Malkan Pharos serves as an Iron Father of the Iron Hands chapter during the era Indomitus. A member of the revered clan, Ralcan, although the Master of the Forge has secured a position among the chapter's Iron Council, many consider him to be an eccentric and nonconformist individual. Allowing himself to embrace emotions whilst refusing total replacement of his organic components, Pharos believes that a balance between machine logic and human instinct is crucial to achieving purpose. Borderline heretical in the eyes of many of his peers, his immense skill as a craftsman, warrior, and mentor of his current chapter master, Gardan Stronos, has regardless vindicated him of much scrutiny. His clan's near destruction wrought during the Scarvus ambush, though the Iron Council sought to censure Clan Raukan as punishment for their weakness, Malkan Pharos alone argued to deliver his brethren to salvation. Appointed to lead his clan into a new era with sanction from Iron Father Christos, after decades of toil, Malkan Pharos managed to use Christos' emotions against him in order to secure his dominance of Clan Raukan. Realizing his own weakness due to Malkan's unorthodox tactics, Iron Father Christos finally understood Pharos' claim that mastering their emotions was paramount to revitalizing their chapter. Forming a begrudging respect for a time, Iron Father Christos regardless fell to the clutches of chaos by refusing to deviate from his cold logic. Embracing the greater demon of Slaanesh, known as the Sapphire King, Christos' inflexible nature molded with the being spawned from the death of Ferrus Manus. Pharos' ideals resonating strongly with Stronos, the recent change in the character of the Iron Hands is due in large part to Malkan's influence, his gallows humor belying his study of his chapter's bleak past. Constructively dismantling the tenets and customs of his chapter to better reduce the weaknesses inherent in their creed, Pharos stood as among the first volunteers of the Iron Hands to cross the Rubicon Primaris. A clear demonstration of the strengths of flesh, Malkan's abstaining from complete augmetic surgeries proved worthwhile as he returned to his chapter stronger than ever. Leading his men from the front of battle lines, clad in Mark X Gravis armor, wielding his power axe, Harrow Hand, and shoulder-mounted heavy bolter, Gorgon's Wrath, his thunderous war cries have never been louder. His role is among the most respected, if not unorthodox warriors of the Iron Tenth, undiminished by his age or peculiar reputation. Anatolis Godolkin served as an Iron Father of the Iron Hands chapter during the 41st millennium. A veteran of over 200 centuries as a senior member of the chapter's spiritual caste, this son of Medusa left his mining clan's landcrawler, the Aes Metallum, at the age of 16 to undertake the trials of an Iron Hand initiate within the highlands of this uncaring world. Given his family heirloom, a bolt pistol by his father to aid his journey to the proving grounds, Anatolis outlived the combined 12 aspirants, some of his own clan, Scarabray, and that of Granislat, who travelled with him across the harsh terrain of Medusa. Armed with 4 clips of ammunition, Anatolis dispatched and 8 rock salamanders to maintain his strength, before scaling a 1,000-meter tall fissure which led to the fabled Land of Shadows. Confronted by a construct of metallic bones, a Deathhood demon droid, Anatolis lost his left hand to the beast, as the dead clan chiefs within the barren city bore witness to his bolt pistol felling the abomination. Collapsing from exhaustion, a skull-faced angel rescued the young man from the embrace of death, his already severed left hand replaced with the customary augmetic, which all his kinsmen bore. Anatolis' training as an aspirant to the chapter complete, his ascension was swift as he began to adapt to the tenets of his new creed, ascending to the rank of Iron Father after 2 centuries of service. Revered for his deeds as a chaplain tech marine of the Iron Hands, Godolkin's actions, made during battles such as those waged against High Fleet Leviathan within the Onyx Shard Gardens of Aesoptua, belying his legendary abhorrence of weakness in all forms. Losing his secondary heart against the Great Devourer on the world of Hamuf, and an eye during his battle against the Hrud Xenos upon the moons of Gomrath, Godolkin's artifice saw to the modification of his war gear to accommodate the myriad lost organs and wounds accrued from constant warfare. An exemplar of the 9th Vergan clan, known as the Brothers of Iburan, his battles made against the forces of chaos within a derelict voidcraft would see to his right hand's replacement 2 years following his left. Outfitted with the 2,000-year-old relic of his clan, the Gauntlet of Menestus by Apothecary Caduceus, its former bearer had been felled by the arch-heretic of Starphalos and henceforth been sealed within the fortress monastery landcrawler of Wayland. summoned to an emergency Council of Iron moments after his surgery's completion. Anatolos met with representatives of each clan, including Dozef Ibanol, venerated dreadnoughts Talumek, Orban Lomax, Banos, Axagaros, brother Avadan, and several kinsmen unknown to even his long career. Informed of Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, which would soon attack the domains of the Medusa system. Though Godolkin demanded to be present to defend his homeworld, the imposing dreadnoughts to which he admired ordered him to lead a mission to the Forge world of Fornax Orbis Majoris. Acceding to their ancient pact made to the Mechanicus of Mars, Anatolos would lead a task force to break the siege of the planet waged by the Death Guard, and meet with Magos Omega Tetronymus Fool for further orders as his kinsmen bled upon the soil of Cadia. Descending upon Manufactory District 12, Ferratorius Prime from their Thunderhawk, the Iron Eagle, the Iron Hands aided the Cadian 108th Wyverns in purging the thralls of Nurgle. Sergeant Vessig leading Anatolos to the senior tech priest, Magos Ludd. The Iron Hands were informed that Magos Fool had disembarked in pursuit of an unknown objective weeks prior. Redeploying to the Argentium mountain range within proximity of the Promethean refineries of District 37. Within the Ordinatus Gehenna, Magos Fool attempted to thwart the Death Guard advance of over 21,861 heretics using this revered god machine. Seemingly destined to lose this irreplaceable artifact of the Omnissiah, its destruction would be prevented as the Iron Hands of Librarian Melkor, Sergeant Vincian, brothers Erastus, Jurgen, Reuben, Ored, Thandar, Tordis, Naltek, Zorian, Cephalus, Momek, Shion, Betorin, Naskin, Gobard, Ebrus, Apothecary Caduceus, and Standard-Bearer Dofus Kansbar took to the field. Godolkin's person galvanized thanks to his Mechanicus Protectiva, which combined a Rosarius and Force Field. His battle servitors, designated Gibeon 12, Job 13, Gigal 674, and Ishmael 192, gave fire support as Godolkin's power axe tore rends through his enemies. Felling the Defiler, known as Ebolus, using a damaged Chimera tank as a means to penetrate its armor, Anatolos reported to Magos Fool and Archmagos Schrödinger within the command bridge of the Gehenna, restraining Fool as he attempted to prevent Schrödinger from firing the Ordinatus Apocalypse cannon upon the position which the Death Guard swarmed. The disciples of the Omnissiah would deny the 14th their prize, rather than allow it to fall into their hands. The destruction wrought, vaporizing thousands of cultists and Death Guard legionaries beneath tides of molten lava. A shockwave of green energy escaped from the target, killing 256 tech priests within exposed portions of the Ordinatus. Archmagos Schrödinger proclaiming Fornax Orbis Majoris to be saved. Fool warned that the Iron Hands must make haste to prevent another site from being secured by heretic forces. Redeployed to the city of Antipax within the mining world of Herod, besieged by cultists led by a rogue psyker, Planetary Governor Phalos Helic had failed in his duty to prevent the rebellion of the so-called Shinari cults. Magos Fool informing Anatolos of the artifact known by the locals as the Babal Stone. This mirror of the relic which the Death Guard had sought could potentially alter the course of Abaddon's campaign. Venturing to the Midian deserts wherein the Babal Stone was located, within the caverns below the sands, cultists conducted a ritual surrounding the strange black obelisk, surrounded by a band of 8 Wordbearers Astartes. Confronting the Dark Apostle within the caverns as they attempted to sunder the ritual, despite Godolkin's best efforts, the Wordbearers succeeded in their efforts, forcing the Iron Hands to retreat. Withdrawing to the Iron Hand strike cruiser in orbit, the Ajax, commanded by Iron Captain Strake of Clan Rauken. Strake showed Godolkin a scan of the area of space in proximity to the Eye of Terror, which had recently turned crimson. Dubbed the Warp Storm of Arakan, with the obelisk's destruction, the Warp Storm had expanded, yet thinned in density, the 200-fold growth of the system revealing a long-lost system of space within its center. Magos Fool explaining that a third artifact had been sundered on the world of Hekla prior to the Iron Hand's intervention. The triangular formation of these obelisks had contained the Arakan system within the Immaterium for over 10 millennia. The Moon of Crucible, said to be at the heart of the system. Anatolos conferred with Iron Captain Strake that the tale of the Ironclad bore mention of the world of Crucible as the potential resting place of their legendary Primarch, Ferrus Manus. Willing to brave the peril of the Warp Storm in order to race against the Wordbearers to reach Crucible, the Iron Hands arrived within the system to find a ship graveyard of both Xenos and human Voidcraft. Beset by the vast Wordbearers flagship, the corruptor of Colchis. Iron Captain Strake distracted the Voidcraft which had once ravaged the soil of Holy Terror during the calamitous final battle of the Horus Heresy, as Anatolos and half of his men deployed to the surface of the moon of Crucible as the remainder defended the Ajax. The last flight of the Iron Eagle crashed landing as the warp storm completely dissipated. Magos Fool aided the Iron Hand's advance, having retrofitted his form to a Chimera tank. Finding upon a 100-meter tall temple, flanked by a statue of a Titan and Space Marine bearing the heraldry of the Iron Tenth, Godolkin entered the tomb of the Ironclad, hoping to find the sarcophagus of his gene-sire. Discovering an army of 81 Titans slumbering within the tomb, such god machines bore firepower enough to raise entire planets, as 40 warlords, 16 warhounds, and 24 reavers stood silent, flanking a 500-kilometer expanse. As Magos Fool attempted to reactivate the largest Titan, known as the Deus Mortem, Godolkin analyzed a gigantic teleportarium capable of transporting such war machines in his efforts to find the temple's Cogitator mind core. Crestfallen to find no trace of Ferrus Manus within the temple, the Iron Hands regardless defended the tomb from waves of Wordbearer thralls, buying time for the tech adepts. Taking heavy casualties, despite their valor, Godolkin ordered a retreat within the temple. Unable to prevent cultists and heretics from swarming the Titans closest to the entrance as they fell back to the Deus Mortem. Dwindled to only 7 men, Anatolos ordered what remained of his task force to overload the Titan's power core. His demands to Magos Fool to destroy the Deus Mortem rather than allow it to be claimed by the forces of chaos, countered by a plasma blast to his chest. Falling to the ground as the hole scored through his chest vaporized his primary heart, Fool in an act of desperation integrated with the Deus Mortem, only to discover its nature had already been corrupted by chaos due to its imprisonment within the warp. Dark Apostle Iscariot, ending the life of Fool as he declared the Titans of the Ironclad to be his to command. Anatolos rose from his injury thanks to the mechanical redundancies which had long eschewed the need for his heart of flesh. Clashing with the Dark Apostle, the scions of their respective faiths drew blood, the Iscariot gloating that his actions shall see to his ascension as a demon prince once the death of Godolkin had proven his might. Losing his arm and the gauntlet of Menestus during the duel, Godolkin struck the Iscariot with his free hand, forcing his skull to be punctured by the Titan's Mindcore probe. Falling from the Titan's cockpit as the merge of heretic and god machine forced it to convulse, the Iron Hands retrieved their severely wounded Iron Father before using the tomb's teleporter to escape to the Ajax. Librarian Melkor, now forever changed by his ordeal, endured during their traversal through the warp. His sacrifice allowed his kinsman to withdraw, as Anatolos ordered Strake to fire Exterminator's payloads onto the tomb of the Ironclad. The Iscariot, reveling in his newly integrated form for a brief moment, as purging flame engulfed the tomb, so too did the closely orbiting Corruptor of Colchis set aflame by the last defiant bombardment of the Iron Tenth. Godolkin's body returned to Medusa, wherein it would be entombed within the dreadnought chassis left by the martyred Talamech. As among the only 8 such Goliaths of his chapter, Anatolos' litanies shouted within battle have never been more fervent. His duty to defend Medusa finally granted as among his chapter's most revered champions, this avatar of Ferrus Manus' wrath, though unable to return his Gene-Father's body to his homeworld, regardless revived the spirit of the Lightbringer in the hearts of his brethren. Verox moved faster than should have been possible for a being of his formidable bulk and age. He knocked the Hellfather's assault cannon aside on his jaw, then bit onto the gun barrel, teeth screaming, chewing out fat sparks as his fist slammed into the Hellfather's girdle plate with a resonant thud. The Hellfather did not seem to register the impact, driving his chain fist into Verox's thick shoulder armor and beginning to carve. Verox's mouth distended, throat rippling with a silent growl. Not with pain so much as exhilaration. He had been waiting a century or more to feel that kind of pain. Agar Verox serves as an Iron Father of the Iron Hands during the era Indomitus. Commanding Clan Vergan as its senior Iron Captain, this veteran Astartes epitomizes the blunt yet effective nature of the most venerated exemplars of his creed. noted for his augmetic, diamantite chainblade teeth and pugnacious character. Regardless of his brutal demeanor, Verox has benefited from superior training by his kin and Mechanicus Magos Uriel Vi. Despite his specialization as a tech marine, as all Iron Fathers must learn, Verox never actively served as such, preferring to bludgeon his enemies to red smears as his acts of service to the Imperium. Vaunted for his service during the Tau Second Sphere of Expansion within the Western Vale, despite the chapter's failure to win the day, Verox's tenacious grit impressed the Iron Council enough to see to his elevation. Mentoring the unorthodox Iron Father, Cardan Stronos, during his years as a neophyte, his swift rise through the ranks of the Iron Hands amusing Verox as he reminisced on the damage he had caused to his Thunderfire cannon during combat with the Tau Xenos on the world of Batakan, demanding as penance he must repair it, to which to this day he has strived to no avail. Clad in a heavily modified panoply of Indomitus Plate Terminator armor, myriad Ducetian sigils mark each world in Xenos Empire purged by his hands. The war trophies hung from his war harness, such as spent shell casings, traitor totems, and Xenos skulls, embellishing his already intimidating visage. The most prominent adherent to the Endurist belief that Ferrus Manus had never been slain and shall return should his sons exceed their strength to heights he deemed worthy. His peers tolerate his adherence to such a death cult should it not interfere with his duties. Discovering the original text of Ferrus Manus, the Canticles of Travel, alongside a war-ravaged fragment of his Primarch's armor with aid from epistolary Lydric Noxin, their readings of the text proved to conflict with copies made and disseminated throughout their chapter. Modified by the Mechanicus to better manipulate the Iron Hands, the voice of Mars, Nico Palpus, confirmed that the doctrines of the Brazen Claws and Red Talons aligned with the original text, much to the chagrin of Lydric. Attacked by a Hellfather, enthralled to the commands of Palpus, Verox reveled in the pain he endured, as his senses rejoiced at the most exhilarating battle he had fought in over a century, his body engulfed in flame of promethium and melting the flesh from his face. The voice of Mars vaporized by the Death Cult assassin, Sarah Valorn, with a blast of her hotshot lasgun. Verox survived the engagement through sheer force of will and stubborn defiance. His exposed bones and dislodged gears tended to upon his return to the Iron Council. Exceeding 700 years of service to his chapter, now allied to the cause of his former protege, Cardan Stronos, his brusque nature and obstinate will to survive, befitting a powerful ally for the long-standing war leader of the Iron Tenth.
Furnus serves as a venerable dreadnought of the Iron Hands chapter during the era Indomitus. Once a chaplain of the Raukan clan, with his injury by the traitor Titan, Angron's fist, Furnus would be severely wounded. Entombed within his dreadnought sarcophagus, Furnus as a member of the Iron Tenth revered those who ascended to such a form and resolved to prove worthy of such an honor. Remaining within his chassis for 4,000 years, Furnus has proven crucial to many victories of his chapter, such as the Wars of Dawnbreak, Foradeka, Helmgard, Fenof's World, and Nightmare Spire. Among the most senior officers of Clan Raukan, the Dreadnought Chaplain is a wealth of wisdom to his kin, and regularly provides counsel during conflict and spiritual strife. Marching into battle at the spearhead of his Dreadnought peers, Furnos bellows canticles of war as his gigantic form crushes all who oppose the Emperor and the Omnissiah. Changing his chassis for that of a modernized Redemptor classification following the birth of the Great Rift, Furnus currently serves within the strike force, Wrath of Medusa. Culling the Xenos within the mining worlds of the Glaciaic Strait, Furnus stands as a champion of his chapter by upholding the virtues and stubborn resolve of the Gorgon.
This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The deeds of the Iron Tenth epitomize the legacy of the harsh taskmaster they seek to avenge. Locked in varying states of grief, denial, and self-loathing, the sons of Ferrus Manus attempt to revere his greatest ideals, whilst wrestling with his inglorious death. Loss is a difficult wound to balm, For it is easy to believe oneself responsible for actions beyond our control, hindsight blinding us to speculate on a means to avoid such dismay. The past can never be undone, nor should it, for loss reminds us of the value of the present and need to uphold bonds with those we love. So do not squander the relationships you have, nor the comrades you cherish, for none of us shall escape the mortality of flesh, and must not waste the time we are given, while it lasts.